Okay, it's 5:00, so I think we'll get started. Good evening. My name's Lisa Lesniak. I'm a board member of the Democratic Women of Boulder County, and I'm thrilled to see all of your faces. Thank you for coming. And we will get started. What's super exciting is coming up in May, we are going to try to meet live and in person. So that'll be very exciting, and we will send out all the information for that once we get there. Next month will still remain virtual. So we'll end the year with a live event, which will be great. Also want to make sure that you all know about our visit to the Capitol, which will be on March 24th. There's still openings available that you can go to our website. And also when Sylvia gets back, she will put that link in the chat for you. It's actually going to be very exciting. I'm pretty sure we're going to be visiting with the governor and have lunch with Phil Weiser. So great opportunity to get in and advocate for whatever you need and be up close in person. So that'll be fun. In the next few days, we'll have a survey coming out about a variety of things about how we want to handle meetings going forward once we start live. And as always, if you are a member, we thank you. We'd love for you to join at a higher level so that we can make a greater impact on our elections. And if you are not a member, please consider joining us. Like we said, we make impact on elections, and the more of us that we have, the greater impact that can be. Tell all of your friends, male, female, everybody. So then the last announcement is that at the end, for the last 15 minutes, we have breakout sessions where we get into smaller groups and get to kind of introduce ourselves, reacquaint ourselves, whichever one it is, and talk about what we just heard, kind of digest it, and talk about things that we can do going forward to make these, advocacy issues that we want to have move forward. And with that, I will introduce Ian Silveri, who you probably all
is here. Danny is here.
Yes. Okay. So Danny, do you want to go first, or do you want Ian to head off?
Danny can totally go first if she wants to.
I don't know if she heard me. Danny? All right. Well, I don't know if she's Sylvia, is she going to go second or first?
I think Ian wants to get to see the baby before the toddler before he goes to bed.
Exactly.
So
all right.
let's have Ian go first.
As he mentioned earlier, we haven't seen Ian in 2 years, and he's got a lot of new exciting stuff going on in his world. If you don't already know, he's the founder of the Bighorn Company, which is a political and communications partnership in Colorado. Over the course of his 15 years in Colorado politics, he's served as the chief of staff to the Speaker of the House, executive director of the Colorado House, and also the executive director of the Colorado House Majority Project. He usually writes a Denver Post column, but I believe that's on hold while Brittany Pedersen, his wife, and who's currently in the Senate of Colorado, is running for the House District 7. He is an adjunct professor at the University of Denver Scrivener Institute for Public Policy, and he's the co-host of the Colorado political podcast that I love, the Get More Smarter Show. It's really great if you haven't connected with that yet. He lives in Lakewood, like I said, with Senator Pedersen and their two-year-old son, Davis, and a dog named Ollie, who's a rescue. So Ian, take it away.
Well, thanks a lot, Lisa. Fortunately, in one sense, I am still writing for the Denver Post until Brittany officially becomes a nominee, knock on wood, in June. But then I will be shown the door from the newspaper. They will be no longer interested in my silly opinions because my wife will be way more important than me, as if she is not already. I'm going to share my screen over here. I've got a little bit of a presentation, not so much. I want to kind of get through this relatively quickly and then leave some room for questions, and also make sure Danny gets a chance to talk about the amazing victory that reproductive choice and rights advocates have had at the Capitol this week. It is truly remarkable what's happening down there. So I'll go quickly so we can get to the good stuff. Can you all see my screen okay? It says what's going on, what's 2020 going to look like? Well, I'm not psychic, but I've been doing this, like Lisa said, for 15 years. So I have a few ideas about what we might be facing. And, throughout the course of this presentation, we're going to take a look at some polling, both national polls and some Colorado polls. There are some troubling signs for Democrats, and there are some optimistic signs for where we're headed, especially in Colorado. We're going to look, like I said, at national polling and see what lessons we can learn from that. And then we're going to dig a little bit into the latest edition of an instrument we call the Rocky Mountaineer, which is a project I was fortunate enough to help start when I was at Progress Now Colorado, and the executive director, Sarah Laughlin, a Boulder County Democrat, has continued. It's a partnership between Progress Now Colorado and the Global Strategy Group, which is one of the premier Democratic polling firms in the country. And then I'll stick around and answer questions until Lisa cuts my mic and kicks me out of the meeting. So let's just get rolling here. First things first, this is a slide of what we call the generic congressional ballot. What that means is 538. Are we all familiar? They're like a polling aggregator organization. They spent a lot of time digging into the data underneath the data. They went ahead and looked at every single poll that every reputable national polling firm has taken since Biden became president about whether voters want Democrats or Republicans in Congress. This is a very typical question that is asked of voters in national surveys all the time. And you can see during the first couple months of Biden's presidency, from April and through about the middle of the fall last year, Democrats were winning. That everybody was under the line because everybody hates politicians, or at least they say so. But everybody was under the line. Democrats were leading Republicans, and now that has inverted. Republicans on average have about a 2.2 percentage point lead over Democrats. And polling averages are actually an amazing way to get a real sense of what's going on in the country. Any one particular poll is sort of a snapshot in time. None of those can be particularly accurate on their own. But when you take the average of all the polls that have been done, and that's what all those weird little dots and noisy signal looking things behind those straight lines, or those curvy lines are, those are every single poll. You get the average, you get a pretty good sense of where voters are right now. So kind of unsurprisingly, right? This is a historically relevant and regular thing. The president's party does poorly in the midterms following that presidential election. It happened to Barack Obama twice. It happened to Donald Trump in 2018. And the chances are pretty good that Democrats will have a 2022 that does not look like 2018 or 2020, but instead looks a little bit more like a 2010 or a 2014. Does that mean it's time to hit the panic button? Not quite yet. Let me show you why. So these are the last 10 national congressional generic polls that are feeding into this survey now. And what they're showing is something very, very interesting. Democrats are in the lead in 7 out of the last 10 of these. Republicans are only leading in 3 of them by 1 point in the morning consult poll that came out today, which is well within the margin of error, by the way, by 8 points from a organization called American Greatness. So you can do your own math and figure out what side of the thing they think they're on. That showed Republicans with an 8-point advantage. And then a Fabrizio Lee and Associates poll for the Wall Street Journal that also tends to lean right. Republicans have a +5 advantage there. But in every other instrument, Democrats are up 4, up 3, up 5, up 2, up 4, up 1, up 3. What does that mean? Well, that means that we're not getting crushed, which is actually very good because, like I said earlier, the midterms tend to be bad for the president's party, and that's okay because that's just the way the pendulum goes. But the fact that we're winning 7 out of the last 10 of these things is really, really interesting. That combined with the fact that, generally speaking, Democrats, we were bracing for like a really bad national gerrymandering project after redistricting because Republicans control so many state legislatures. And for the most part, that's where the redistricting, reapportionment, drawing of lines, what some people call gerrymandering, happens, favoring Republicans by huge numbers. And in nearly every measure, it actually looks like the vast majority of competitive states produce a lot of competitive maps, Colorado included. We have this new 8th congressional district that's a 50-50. We have the 7th district that my wife is running in that is about a +6, +7 Democratic district. So not great, but certainly competitive and certainly tilting our direction. And it looks like 2022 is going to be a dogfight. In my estimation right now, looking at the data, it looks somewhere between like a 2014, which was a bad year, right? We lost the state Senate. Senator Udall lost to Cory Gardner by 1.8 percentage points, not huge, but he still lost. And like a 2016, which was like weird, not good, not bad, just kind of weird. Where in Colorado, we actually did all right, or across the country, obviously very, very bad things happened. So by all counts, a fairly unpopular President Biden should be producing some really negative down-ticket effects, but it turns out that's not really happening. I'll show you some Biden approval numbers in a second here. So if you look on the top left here, those numbers are where he started when he first became president. 53% approval rating, 36% disapproval rating, which is a nice place to start your presidency. Obama started in the 60s. George W. Bush started kind of middling, but then shot upward after 9/11. So to start at 53 is not so bad. Today, or rather yesterday, when I was making the presentation, day 420 of Biden's presidency, it's almost flipped over, but not quite, where 51.9% of voters say they disapprove of Biden on average, and 42.9% say they approve. Now, at this time in Trump's presidency, he was actually doing quite a bit worse. He was at bare 40, and he never really got close to 50% during the entirety of his presidency. And yeah, his party got thumped in the 2018 midterms after that weird election of 2016. Republicans never really recovered from the weight he was putting on the general GOP ticket. I'll show you some Colorado numbers that are going to be really fascinating in a minute here, because it kind of defies the logic that a lot of folks like me have put into congressional generics and their predictive power on elections in the past, which is like, oh, the president's party normally gets killed and it's going to be real bad, especially their approval rating is not great. Let's look at some other numbers though. So like I said, this is courtesy of Progress Now Colorado, Sarah Laughlin, ED over there, and Andrew Bauman, a pollster for Global Strategy Group. They do a quarterly survey you can find at mountaineerresearch.com. This is the 7th edition of the poll. So there have been 6 other polls that we've released basically into the public domain to say, hey, everybody pay attention to this. So they did this survey between February 11th and February 15th. So it's almost a month old. And this was before Ukraine, and this was sort of during Omicron. So things have changed significantly, but not that much. And I still think that because like gas prices were going up, inflation was a major story, Omicron was on the rise, a lot of restrictions are still in place. This is still a pretty reliable snapshot as to where people are right now. And if you look at those congressional generics I showed you a minute ago, Democrats are not doing as badly as maybe they could be right now. The margin of error of this survey is 3.5%. We surveyed 800 registered voters in Colorado. So despite the intervening Omicron wave that damaged President Biden and caused Democrats to lose some ground on the generic congressional ballot on that national level, the political situation among registered voters in Colorado has remained remarkably stable. We did another poll back in October, and things are basically the same. Democratic lead on the gubernatorial, so the governor's election, and the legislative ballots have held pretty steady. And while Biden's personal ratings are underwater, there's no denying that, Senator Bennett, Governor Polis are well above water. And Polis has actually improved since October. So let's look at these numbers a little bit. I'm going to grab my little laser pointer over here. Can you see this little red dot? So party reg, vote for governor, vote for state leg. Ignore these first two. These two at the bottom are what's interesting. When we asked if the election were held today, for whom would you vote, Democrat or Republican for the Colorado House of Representatives or the Colorado Senate, 46% said the Democrat, 40% said Republican, 14% said undecided. So that's a net Democratic advantage of 6 points in February. So the poll that was done a month ago, and that's down 1 point, which is well within the 3.5% margin of error from October. So that's what we mean by relatively steady. Vote for governor, Polis, 53% he gets the support of 53% of voters, 10% say they undecided. And then we tested Heidi Ganahl, who's sort of like the presumptive front runner, the very last statewide elected Republican official in Colorado as a CU regent, by the way. Polis is up 16 against her there, and was up 17 in October. So he has stayed very, very steady. When we ask about favorability, Democrats are doing pretty well there too. Jared Polis, 52%, so roughly the same number that said they'll vote for him, give him a favorable rating versus 38% that say unfavorable. So that's a net of plus 14. And like I said, that's up from October's plus 8. So people are actually seeing Polis's performance as governor improve and are reacting accordingly. Senator Bennett, who's up for re-election this time, for the first time in 6 years, has a 42% favorable rating, 29% say they can't really say up or down, and only 29% say unfavorable, which is a plus 13 on net. That's really, really good. If you're an incumbent going into re-election, you want to see your net approval ratings above double digits, 10, 13, 14 points like Polis and Bennett are experiencing here, very good. Like I said before I got here, Joe Biden, not doing so hot in Colorado, not doing so hot across the country right now, unfortunately. He's got a -8 net approval rating, with 44% rating him favorable, 52% rating him unfavorable. But let's take a look at the next two clowns, shall we? Lauren Boebert, who is the face and unfortunately for many of us, the voice of the Colorado Republican Party, has a 26% favorability rating, 35% unfavorable, and 39% rate her unfavorably. That is the same number that rate Polis unfavorably, which is essentially the number of registered Republicans in the state of Colorado. Donald Trump continues to do incredibly poorly. Colorado voters do not like this guy. 38% give him a favorable rating, only 3% say they don't know, and a whopping 59% say no thanks, no Trump, not now, not ever. So those are some good fundamentals to look at when we're talking about the Colorado electorate heading into what should be a challenging election cycle that aren't actually that bad. The Republican brand is in tatters. They keep serving up unforced errors. While Governor Polis maintains strong personal standing both overall and among key groups of voters, Lauren Boebert and, like I said, Donald Trump are real albatrosses for the party. They're kind of weighing the whole ticket down. Trump is intensely unpopular, but his standing is even worse with key groups of voters when you look under the surface a little bit. The dichotomy here is important in the suburbs, right? Like Jefferson County, Adams County, Arapahoe County. These are the places where we see a lot of the sort of swing districts take shape and the elections get decided essentially by voters in these counties. He remains incredibly unpopular. He is underwater with suburban voters by 29 points. Conversely, Governor Polis has a plus 23 net approval advantage among the same suburban voters. So if those folks are going to be deciding the 2022 election, which they typically do, the fact that Polis is plus 23 and Trump is minus 29 is a very good place for Democrats to start, especially considering where President Biden is. With the standard bearers of the party being the Boeberts and the Trumps of the world, it is really no wonder that Republicans have a really remarkably consistent ceiling of about 40% among registered voters. When we ask the ballot questions for whom would you vote today, or do you have a favorable, unfavorable opinion, Republicans almost never crack that 40% number. And if you follow me and you follow politics, you know that 40% is not enough to win an election. You need 50% plus one. In most elections, especially ones conducted here in Colorado, there's ranked choice voting and stuff like that we won't get into right now. The Republican vote share in the generic ballot has always stayed between 38 and 40%. In this survey, the Republican share on party ID in every single ballot is between 37 and 40. They've built themselves a very high ceiling, and if I had to guess, it's built out of Lauren Boebert and Donald Trump, and the fact that they are the ones representing the Republican Party in the minds of many Colorado voters. Republicans at the national and state levels keep reinforcing the same unpopular stances that are going to make it difficult for them to break through this ceiling here. The last survey we did back in last October showed that Republicans have really major vulnerabilities around support for extreme anti-abortion policies. We're seeing that take shape all over the country right now. Their support for January 6th and the insurrection, their continued support for conspiracy theorists who insist that Trump won in 2020, which was now a very long time ago. And we've seen Colorado Republicans propose insane things like an abortion registry for a database for every single person who's ever made a medical choice. Totally insane stuff. Tina Peters, the Mesa County clerk and recorder, is now running for Secretary of State, possibly from prison. So she's another standard bearer for the party over there. And we don't feel like that's going to have a bad effect on the blue team, more likely to have a bad effect on the red team. And then you got people like Ron Hanks, who put out an ad today with his own homemade pictures of the insurrection because he was there defending the January 6th attack on the Capitol, called it legitimate political discourse. And that's a huge vulnerability for Republican voters. Colorado voters do not think that January 6th was legitimate political discourse. They see it for what it was. While Polis has a strong personal standing, the job approval is actually higher. More like overall and on the coronavirus pandemic, how he's been handling it, that's remained not only stable since October, but all the way back to September of 2020, even as we saw President Biden's number decline pretty significantly. Heidi Ganahl, CU Regent and presumptive GOP nominee, maybe, maybe not. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Her name ID is in a pitiful 20%. That means out of every voter that we asked, hey, what do you think about Heidi Ganahl? Only 1 out of 5 of them could even identify her. 20% of the voters could say, like, I know who that is and I have an opinion about it. The fact that she's the GOP presumptive nominee for governor with 20% name ID in March of the election year is bad news for the red team, especially with Jared Polis polling so high on job approval and personal rating. She's underwater on the voters that matter and the ones that know her. She only gets an 8% favorability rating and an 11% unfavorable rating. So if you're a politician and people know you and they don't like you, and most of them don't know you, that's a very bad place to start a statewide election. By more than 2-to-1 ratio, it's 5% favorable, 11% unfavorable. That's no good. What's really interesting about this and what's surprising is that Ganal is actually polling worse than the far-right extremist candidate, Danielle Neuschwanger, a fun word to say and an impossible word to spell. She trails Polis by 11 points, but Ganal trails him by 16 points. Danielle Neuschwanger said, among other things, that Jared Polis is actually only pretending to be gay, and that the solution to the visible homelessness issue that we're seeing in Denver right now is to release wolves into the streets of the city. So this is not a well person who belongs absolutely nowhere near the state capitol, probably even with chaperone. Governor Polis's handling of the COVID pandemic is one of the reasons he gets high marks for his overall job approval. Some of us may have been frustrated with no statewide mandates on masks, and some of us may have been frustrated with the public health measures that have been put in place. But it looks like the voters generally are really receptive to how Governor Polis handled this pandemic. He's also overperforming Biden by a huge margin because Colorado voters look at the state economy as a really good thing. They look at the national economy as maybe not doing so well. By a solid 56% to 40% margin, Colorado voters give the state's economy a positive rating, including 2-to-1 among Democrats and unaffiliateds. We're seeing this weird pattern emerging in polling where Democrats and unaffiliateds kind of agree with each other, and then Republicans are kind of like all the way over here in Saturn land. And that's a good thing. We'd like that to continue. The positive sentiment is also driven by men and college-educated voters and voters in the Denver metro area. But to be clear, voters are much more pessimistic about the state of the U.S. economy. And like I said, this is before Russia, this is before the gas prices narrative started taking hold, before inflation was sort of like the only thing people were talking about. Only 1/4 of voters are giving the country's economy a positive rating at this moment, which I think makes a little bit of sense, quite frankly. When it comes to the issue landscape in Colorado, voters prefer Democrats by pretty sizable margins on most issues, including the issues that matter the most in determining what's called vote choice. A regression analysis, which is a very fancy way of saying, like, we did a bunch of math, we looked at all the issues, and we tried to tie them to who they vote for based on what issues they care about. Shows that all the issues that we tested, the 3 things that were most correlated with that generic ballot, are you going to vote for Democrat or Republican for state leg or Congress? We're responding to the coronavirus pandemic, where they give Democrats and Governor Polis very good marks, bringing down the cost of healthcare and prescription drugs, same story there, and looking out for working and middle-class Coloradans. I mean, look at some of these numbers over here. You've got a situation where responding to the coronavirus pandemic, Democrats are favored 48 to 35, that's plus 13 and plus 16 among unaffiliateds. Bringing down the cost of healthcare and prescription drugs, Democrats are favored 47 to 35. That's plus 12 with the overall and plus 17 with unaffiliateds. And looking out for working and middle class Coloradans, that's 45 to 40, a bit closer, plus 5 total, but plus 9 among unaffiliateds. So if this election is about who handled COVID well, who's going to make sure that healthcare and prescription drug costs are lower, and who's looking out for working and middle class, Democrats are going to do just fine in 2022 in Colorado. I can't speak for other states. But there are some warning signs under the surface that we really shouldn't ignore. When we talk about rise of cost of living, we talk about protecting public safety. These are the 2 major narratives that Republicans have been really hammering over the last year or so. Democrats are trusted 37%, Republicans are trusted 43%. That's a -6 overall, and same among unaffiliateds. And we talk about protecting public safety, 39% say Democrats, 46% say Republicans. That's -7 overall, -6 among unaffiliated. So not a death knell by any means, but something that we should really pay attention to and not ignore. But the good news here is that Republicans are telegraphing that their plan is to center all their 2022 communications and campaigns around crime and cost of living. That last slide shows that it makes sense for them, and those issues are traditionally more pro-Republican. Look, if they were losing on those 2 things right now, we'd be looking at more like a 2018-2020, but it's going to be a competitive election. The good news for the blue team is that Republicans think these issues are going to be silver bullets, and they're not. They really can't overcome Colorado voters' current inherent preference for Democrats. The survey has some pretty bad news for them. We simulated the arguments and basically said, here's a Democratic message on crime and cost of living, here's a Republican message on crime and cost of living, and we treated everybody everybody pretty fairly. Initially, like I said, Democrats are getting on public safety, 39% of voters trust Democrats more, 46% trust Republicans more. But after we tell them about our plans to make sure that, you know, people aren't languishing in jail, and we're not going to do the same kind of lock them up, throw away the key, failed stuff that we did in the 90s. We're going to do proactive things to prevent crimes from happening instead of just punishing people after the fact. We fight it to a draw. It's 45-46, right? When you talk about cost of living, the same thing happens, right? Republicans just want tax cuts for the wealthy, same old nonsense. Democrats want investments in healthcare and education and public transportation, all these things. Like I said, we start -6, but again, we fight this one to a draw. So it's really important that Democrats get their message out there, because if they don't, then Republicans have built-in advantages on these. But as we said in the previous slide, it doesn't matter all that much because voters are really focused on middle class economics, making sure prescription drugs are affordable, and who handled the coronavirus pandemic better. I'm going to talk a little bit about the state Senate and state House now, and then I'll leave some room for questions if I have some time left. There are 8 targeted Senate campaigns in Colorado this year, which is the largest number we have had in a very long time. Normally there's about 5 or maybe even 6, but this year it's 8 of them. Right now, Faith Winter, incumbent Democrat, is running for re-election in District 25. The performance of that district is an estimated 56.2%. That's Broomfield and Westminster. Now it used to just be Westminster, so that's pretty good. Faith's terrific. She works really hard. She doesn't even have an opponent yet. So we feel pretty good about her. Their assembly is going to produce one. They didn't have anybody getting signatures, which were actually due yesterday. Kyle Mullica was facing a primary from our friend Joe Salazar briefly, but Representative Salazar decided not to run. He's got a 3-way against a Republican and a Libertarian. This district is about 53.2%, so still pretty good. Lisa Cutter, current state rep, is running in Senate District 20, which is the sort of successor district to where my wife Brittany currently represents, in a head-to-head with a guy named Tim Walsh. It's a 51.8%, so that's Lakewood and some unincorporated Jeffco. Dylan Roberts in Vail and Summit, Nick Henriksen in Pueblo, Tom Sullivan in Littleton, Tony Exum and Yolanda Aliva are having themselves a primary in Colorado Springs. And then there's a pickup potential seat here as well, Janice Marchman in the 15th district down there in Loveland, rural Boulder. Maybe some of you even live in this district. So you can see those last 3 districts are actually tilt Republican, 49%, 48.8%, 48.2%. Here's where things get interesting. If the political environment worsens, like right now we're seeing Polis with 52-53%. We're seeing Biden not do so hot. We're seeing the generic ballot favor Democrats, but not by margins that they had recently. These marginal districts are really going to make a difference in who controls the gavel going in it. And let's face it, if Republicans are able to take the state Senate, that puts the Democratic agenda completely on hold for at least 2 years, right? Democrats since 2018 have been consistently able to deliver victories for working people. A lot of them aren't everything we wanted, but the ball has moved really far forward on climate, on pay equity, on abortion rights, which I know Danny will talk a little bit more about in a minute here. And as long as we're selling those popular things to voters, I think we're probably going to be okay here, but we shouldn't take anything for granted. Whenever I talk to you folks, whenever I have the opportunity, one of the things I try and mention as much as possible is that Boulder's lucky. You have a lot of progressives in office. You don't really have to worry about your state legislative races or your county commissioner races, but for primaries, the general elections tend to go for the blue team in your neck of the woods these days. So we need all of your help in all these other places. Broomfield, Westminster, Adams County is going to be huge. Jeffco is going to be huge. Those mountain districts are going to be huge. Pueblo is going to be really important. Centennial, Arapahoe County, Southeast Colorado Springs, and then those rural Loveland, Boulder, and Larimer County districts are going to be really important too. So pick your favorite, ideally somewhere in the middle of this pack here between the sort of Senate District 20, Lisa Cutter, and that 27th district in Littleton, and volunteer as much as possible. Democrats have a 20 to 15 majority right now, so they can, they can't lose more than 2 seats before things get really scary really fast. On the House side, there are 19 targeted races. Now, Lisa mentioned earlier, I had a job a long time ago where I ran this thing called the House Majority Project. It was our job to maintain the majority, which there's a 65-seat chamber. So 33 of those seats is the majority. Right now, Democrats have a historic 41-seat majority. And the best thing about Democrats having a 41-seat majority means there's only 24 Republicans in the state House. Ouch. That is the smallest number of Republicans that have been in the state legislature since Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president. Fun fact. There are more Democrats in the House than there are Republicans in the state capitol. Fun stuff. That is probably not going to last. Like, let's face it, that was the highest watermark ever. We got there in 2018, and we stayed there in 2020. And redistricting really scrambled the map and made a lot of these districts quite a bit more competitive than they had been in the last 2 election cycles. So Stephanie Vigil down in El Paso County is running in possibly the toughest competitive race, 45.9%. That would be a pickup district. That's not one we have right now. That would get us to 45. If we sweep and win that district, that would be an insanely good night for us. Jennifer Parenti is running an excellent campaign against Dan Woog, who is the incumbent. His district got a lot more competitive in Weld County there. It's also got some Boulder in it, 46.6% Democratic performance. Tammy Story moving from the Senate to run for House against either Colin Larson or some person who's primarying him, the last name Wagner. And I won't go through all these races, but the incumbents that we should be worrying about defending are David Ortiz down there in Arapahoe County, amazing disabled combat Army helicopter vet, wonderful guy, exactly the kind of people that should be running for office, in my opinion. Mark Snyder down there in El Paso County. It used to be like Manitou Springs, downtown Colorado Springs, very progressive district. It's gotten a lot more competitive. Julie McCluskey in the mountains, Barbara McLaughlin down in Durango, Mary Young up there in Weld County, Lindsay Doherty in Northwest Jeffco in Arvada, and Brianna Titone, Matt Gray, and Shannon Bird are all really, really important races. You can see the same kind of Democratic performance distribution in that right column. So those, in this instance, just like sort of dissimilar to the Senate, I'd really focus on Vigil through Doherty. I mean, Brianna is an amazing rep. She runs a killer campaign. I'm not too worried about her, but she can definitely use our help too. Shannon Bird's on the bubble, but unless the year is just really, really bad, I'm not sure either one of them are going to see a really, really tough race. But if you know them, volunteer for them. But you can see there's 19 seats here that we really need to focus on. And we can lose a lot of them and maintain the majority. I mean, technically, we can lose every single one of these seats from 16 down to 46, right? And still maintain the 33 seat majority. We just don't like it to ever get that close. So let's not make that happen, shall we? Let's work our tails off and make sure that we have as many Democrats in the House and Senate as possible. So that's my little slideshow. Is my screen off now? Give me a thumbs up if it is. Awesome, thank you so much. I'd be happy to take some questions. I'd also be happy to get out of Danny's way so she can tell you about all the good stuff that Cobalt and company have been doing down in the building.
That was fantastic, Ian, as always. So thank you so much. Anybody have any specific questions? Well, it looks like you covered everything. Wonderful.
I think Donna's got one. I see
on.
Kay over there. Yeah, let's go with Donna first.
Okay, Donna.
Just a quick question. I didn't know Tammy Story was trying to move from one house to the other. Can you just quickly just share with us what that's about?
I don't pretend to be in Senator Story's head, but I imagine it has to do with the fact that her Senate district got very, very bad in redistricting, and the House seat that she lives in is quite a bit more competitive. So I think it's a smart move.
Okay.
I think it's going to be a tough race, but I think we should do it.
Thanks.
You bet. Great question.
Somebody else had their stuff.
I think Kay, did I see? Where did she go?
You're on mute there, folks.
Lisa, somebody's asking in the chat just about Lauren Boebert too.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I love that the question is simply Lauren Boebert ? Yeah, you got me. That's my reaction to her as well. Not a fan. I showed this on one of the slides earlier on, but ultimately, you know, she is incredibly unpopular. We did a approval sort of favorable, unfavorable question. 26% of Colorado voters rated her favorably, 39% rated her unfavorability. That's -13. Here's the thing. The good people of the Western Slope have a terrible representative, and none of us wish she were in Congress, embarrassing us every single day. If I'm being purely political and cynical, which like often it is my job to do, she's the best thing that happened to Democrats in a long time, because she is like the inmate that escaped the asylum and is now representing the entire party, and she will not keep her mouth shut, which is fine by me. So she's going to make endorsements in primaries. She's going to have her fingerprints all over stuff because she, like Trump, can't help herself. And while I wish that she were not in Congress, making Colorado look very, very bad, or at least a part of us, 1/7, soon to be 1/8, every single day, I have to say that it is not the worst thing in the world politically for voters to see who these people truly, really are in front of their faces every single day. It's a hard thing to balance, but I do believe that it is important for voters to know truly who these folks are sort of under the surface, and she doesn't have any qualms about being her exact self all the time, or whatever that character she's playing is, I guess.
Yep. Kay, looks like you're unmuted now if you want to go for it.
This is Dan instead of Kay. You probably know that. So talk about the district, just to the brand new District 8, Congressional District 8. Where do we stand on that?
It is a pure coin flip. We are talking like 50-50, hard as nails, giant fight. We've got 2 Democrats running, State Rep Yadira Caraveo, Adams County Commissioner Chad Tedesco. Both are friends, both are terrific. I'm not weighing in on this one. Personally, on the Republican side, you have Thornton Mayor Jan Coleman, who put out a very confusing video about gas prices the other day, because she's apparently an oil and gas engineer, so probably shouldn't be anywhere near Congress, if you ask me. That type of person is not necessary. Barb, they have plenty. Oil and gas has plenty of influence in Congress as it is. I don't think they need more. You have Barb Kirkmeyer, who's a current state senator, former Weld County Commissioner, another very industry-friendly individual. I believe that she's got the support of Americans for Prosperity. It's either her or Coleman. And then you have a couple wackadoos like Lori Sane, if you don't remember her. She's a state representative that was arrested for trying to smuggle a loaded gun onto an airplane while she was a sitting state representative. Look her up. The mugshot's terrific. Besides that, like you have a couple other hangers on and whatnot. It looks like Coleman made the ballot. Her signatures got verified a couple days ago. And I think Kirkmeyer turned them, and the rest of them are going through assembly. So we're going to let them just kind of tear each other apart, and hopefully Chaz Tedesco and Representative Caraveo keep it clean, have a nice issues-based primary, and whoever emerges victorious from that gets the support of the other one and all of their staff. Democrats in Colorado are pretty good at that stuff these days. Republicans tend to hold grudges. So if it's a very, very bad year, and if they have a good candidate and maybe we aren't able to unify afterwards, this thing could get in trouble really fast. But I think our candidate quality is really, really high. I think they're both running great campaigns. I think because there are more Republicans running against each other, the chances that they kind of spend down and hurt each other more than maybe we will is not a bad shot. And if it's a fair fight, I think we can pull it out. It's going to be really, really close. So against my own personal self-interest, if you're looking to volunteer for a congressional race, I would consider the 8th. I would also consider the 7th, which is within my personal self-interest. Any other questions? This is fun. I can do this all night.
Hi, Ian. Can you hear me?
Hi, Senator Hawkins Lewis. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
What a surprise.
Yeah, no, I have been a member of Democratic Women of Boulder County forever. I don't want to take up much time, but I'm putting in an extra push for the Colorado Senate. I put that in the chat. I just want to encourage people to really think about if you have to pick and choose who to support. I am personally really worried about the Colorado Senate. We have some polling, and I put in the chat that shows that down ticket races are not polling nearly as well as our wonderful governor. So can you tell us a little, is that what you're seeing? That's what we're hearing.
Yeah, so here, I'll just put the slide back up for one moment if it's helpful. This is the Senate district list that I talked to some smarter folks than me and helped develop over here. Senator Hawkins Lewis is exactly right. If anything is in danger this election cycle, the state Senate majority is really the highest on the list, if I'm being totally honest. And it's these districts exactly that I'll hopefully see again, from Faith Winter in 25 down to this pickup opportunity in Loveland and rural Boulder, that are really going to make the difference here. We've seen the difference between a Democratic held Senate and a Republican held Senate. We saw what happened between 2014 and 2018 when absolutely nothing could get done because Republicans were in charge of the Senate. And we saw the difference when folks like Senator Hawkins-Lewis and her caucus have the majority in both chambers, and the kind of progress that we can make with that being the case. So I agree entirely. If you're looking to volunteer for races, I would talk to Senator Hawkins-Lewis. She's plugged in more so than I am these days, but these are the ones that are really looking like they're on the bubble, and they're going to make the difference in terms of who controls the majority. Thank you for that excellent and timely plug.
Thanks, Ian. Great to see you.
Always, and you as well.
Thank you so much, Ian. I'm gonna cut you there so we can get on to Danny Newsom. Very much appreciate your time and all of the effort you put into this. It's always so helpful for us to make some decisions about where we can best impact what we need to do to get our progressive issues front and forward. So
thank you so much, everybody. It's my favorite real room. It's my favorite Zoom room. So invite me back anytime you need me, and I'll be there.
We will do, for sure. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Okay, well, allow me to now follow up on some legislation that it's HB 22-1279, the Reproductive Health Equity Act that Danny Newsom, who's with Cobalt, has been working tirelessly to get this moving forward. And so she's going to give us all the ins and the outs and a quick introduction to Danny. She's currently the Director of Strategic Partnerships with Cobalt, and Cobalt is formerly NARAL ProChoice Colorado. She also managed the ACLU of Colorado's education and outreach efforts, was in education and communication for the Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Community Center of Colorado, and did communications and training at the Chinook Fund. She has been a longtime attorney, and she directed the City of Boulder's Human Rights Office at once upon a time, served as an Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights and Labor in the Colorado Attorney General's Office. And then on top of all of that, because that's not enough, she has a master's in arts in U.S. history, and has also taught American history at the UC Denver campus, Metropolitan State, and Community College of Aurora. With no further ado, Danny, please get us up to speed on what we can do to help RIA get passed.
Hi, Lisa. Man, after 2 years of this, I can still be a rookie. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Wow, Ian's presentation had all the bangs and whistles, and I'm pretty old school, so you're gonna have to listen to me. I don't have graphics to keep you occupied, but thanks for having me. And just a little about Cobalt. Lisa mentioned that we used to be NARAL ProChoice Colorado. 2 years ago, we separated amicably from the national, but we've been around since 1967. We've had a couple of name changes, but Colorado being the first state in that year to liberalize its abortion laws. And that's when Cobalt, under a different name, got its start. So we've been around the block several times. And I also think I should mention that Cobalt is a member of a 7-member coalition. It's the Colorado Reproductive Health, Rights, and Justice Coalition. And that includes Cobalt, COLOR. COLOR is Colorado Organization for Latina Opportunity and Reproductive Rights, Interfaith Alliance, New Era, ACLU of Colorado, Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains, and of course, Ian's former employer, Progress Now. And so that is the Reproductive Health Rights and Justice Coalition in Colorado. All right, on to RIA, the Reproductive Health and Equity Act. It was introduced into the Colorado House on March 3rd and approved just last Saturday morning after a 24-hour or whatever, maybe 26-hour filibuster, if for lack of a better word, by the Republicans, but it was approved. And it's now in the state Senate. In fact, I'll be testifying on behalf of RIA tomorrow in the state Senate. And I did testify last week in the state House. The hearing is tomorrow, and we'll see if the weather allows us to convene or not, since we're expecting snow. But In one area, there's no suspense. In another area, there might be suspense. Let's take the good news. We've got the votes. We've got the votes. So there we go. But what's important is that that no amendments are added to RIA. We want it just as it is. So there were no amendments added in the House. And it is our fervent hope that there will be no amendments added in the state Senate. No amendments. So what is RIA? Well, RIA will make the following fundamental rights in Colorado by statute, not by constitutional amendment, but by statute. Okay, so the right to refuse or use contraception, the right to choose to continue a pregnancy, and if the fates allow, to give birth, or the right to choose an abortion. And the bill also states that a fertilized egg, an embryo, or a fetus do not have independent rights under the law of Colorado. Okay, so no personhood. I see Dan clapping. So, yes, okay. Oh, yes, and oh God, I feel like, remember Romper Room? So all these people I see clapping. And so a lot of thought went into the language in RIA, and we really don't want any amendments. But the thing is, let's assume that no amendments are attached. We certainly have the votes in the Senate. It's already passed the House. Governor Polis will sign it. So we have RIA. Okay, let's just, fingers crossed, and that's what we want. But the radical anti-abortionists never stop. Already in this session, 3 anti-abortion measures have been defeated in the Health and Insurance Committee. Ian mentioned one of them, the abortion registry. The other 2, one was personhood, the other would have criminalized abortion, and they just never stop. I was actually down at the Secretary of State's building, well, it's a big building. Anyway, her office in that building, and challenging the title of a proposed ballot measure for the 2022 ballot. And this measure, this was only about the title, and we got a bit of what we wanted, but this measure would make it would criminalize the intentional, causing the intentional death of a fetus. So this could make the ballot, the statewide ballot in November. Okay, and so I'm thinking though, since in Colorado, since 2008, Coloradans have defeated by wide margins 4 statewide initiatives that were intended to ban in some way abortion, including, of course, 2 years ago, Proposition 115. And since 2010, there have been 44 pieces of legislation, anti-abortion legislation in Colorado that have been defeated. So these people are relentless. And so it's really important that we stay vigilant. In fact, even though RIA has the votes, I would encourage you to contact your state senator and let them know. I mean, and in some way it's preaching to the chorus, but nevertheless, let them know how important RIA is, particularly considering what's happening outside of Colorado. In fact, RIA is going through the state legislature now because of what's happening outside of Colorado. Lisa, how am I on time?
You're good. You've got, if you want to do questions, you've got 6 more minutes.
Okay,
Then
all
we
right,
can do
good.
5 minutes of questions.
Okay, well, anyway, so what's going on outside of Colorado? And again, I think I'm preaching to the choir that I'm a member of, but obviously it's the United States Supreme Court. the United States Supreme Court, the Texas vigilante law, and of course, the case out of Mississippi, Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, the Mississippi state law that banned abortion at 15 weeks. So the court majority is either going to neuter Roe versus Wade beyond recognition or outright overturn it. And as a practical matter, the holding of Roe that a pregnant person, as a matter of constitutional law, is legally entitled to obtain abortion prior to fetal viability. As a practical matter, Roe doesn't exist in Texas and in other states where, like Mississippi, frankly, where you may have one abortion facility attempting to provide services for the whole population who wants an abortion. So the sad fact of the matter is, and I think we need to pay attention to this, that although Roe is still technically the law of the land right now, in practicality, there are places, Texas and other places too, where the people who need abortion care, who want abortion care, cannot get abortion care. Another factor on the national scene is Congress, because Democrats hold a sliver of a majority in the Senate. And when it comes to the Women's Health Protection Act, WIPA, not even that sliver. I'm looking at you, Joe Manchin. And I actually kind of forget where Senator Kristen Sinema was on the Women's Health Protection Act, but there's no way. In fact, it went down to defeat. So whether it's the US Supreme Court or the United States Congress, no can do. And if this, let's say the Supreme Court overturns Roe and returns the decision about abortion to state legislatures, well, we've got to act. Because although Coloradans have made it clear that, and that's a lot of independents and some Republicans too, have made it clear that they want the right to abortion maintained in Colorado. You know, we actually don't have any statute, any provision that actually protects abortion. So, and after the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, let's say they do return the choice, the decision regarding abortion to the states. The Guttmacher Institute estimates that approximately 26 states, so 50% plus one, will in some way ban or restrict abortion, are likely to. So that's really, really daunting. 26 states, which is going to put a lot of pressure on states like Colorado and our neighbor to the south, New Mexico, to step up. And we need to be ready to do that. And having RIA in place is one way to do that. So action steps, please contact your state senators. RIA is a priority, no amendments. And I just have to say this, although why would I be saying it to the Democratic women of Boulder County and men of Boulder County? Why would I be saying this? But vote, for God's sake. This I don't like Hillary Clinton crap got us 3 reactionary Supreme Court justices. It's just, and they're there for life. It's just heartbreaking. And I will do a pitch for Cobalt's abortion fund. Cobalt does have, oh, from Terry, I think it's Terry, Sinema actually voted yes for the Women's Health Protection Act. She's still not getting into heaven, but no, her sins are too many. Her sins are too many. Okay. But maybe her ride to below will be slower than Manchin's. Okay. All right. But Cobalt does have an abortion fund, and we work with clinics in Colorado, in New Mexico, and in tough territory in Utah and in Nevada. And we provide financial assistance for the abortion procedure, and also practical support for transportation, lodging, childcare, and meals. So there is the Cobalt Abortion Fund, because those independent abortion funds, Cobalt isn't the only one across the United States, but those independent abortion funds are going to be so very important in a post-Roe America. So I have wrapped up my 101 with no graphics. So if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to talk with you.
So thank you so much, Danny. Always a pleasure to see you. I love your energy and your passion, and you're so enthusiastic. And I think all of us very much appreciate all the work you've done over the years. And unfortunately, we still got to this place, right? So, right. So everybody, she said, call your senator. I'm guessing that everybody on here knows. And if not, you can go to our website to call Mr. Fenberg. Is probably for most of you. And so are there any other particular issues that, like you said that you believe that Governor Polis is on board, so no need to bother him, because we are going to see him next week.
Well, you could thank him for, thank him for his enthusiastic support of RIA. Yes.
Great.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. That's always good. Yes.
Excellent. Kay, I see that you guys have your hands up if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, question for Danny. I put it in the chat, but I'm afraid I wouldn't catch her. I'm very concerned about Missouri's provision going after people who support women going out of state for abortions. Many of them come to Colorado. So any comment on that?
Kay, thank you. That's going to end up in court. That's going to end up in court. Missouri is not the only state. I tell you, it's like the hounds of hell have been unleashed. Whether it's abortion, whether it's, oh my goodness, in Texas, the parents of trans children, it is just insane. But since in Missouri, they're actually trying to target people who leave the state. I mean, we've got freedom to travel, okay, and we've got it in. I hate to be the lawyer, but we do have freedom to travel, and we have an interstate commerce clause, and so there are some issues there that it may end up in court. It's just that I will just say Republicans have thrown not just decency, but they've thrown the Constitution and constitutional principles to the wind.
Vigilantism.
So, yeah, and so that's going to end up in court. Of course, the makeup of our courts has changed. And I imagine this would end up in federal court, but the composition of our federal courts have changed. So it's hard to predict what's going to happen. It's hard to predict what's going to happen, Kay, except that it will end up in court if it actually passes. Some items you're probably actually not hearing about, because believe it or not, even in red states, some items are being pulled from the table. But if the Missouri law actually goes through, it's headed for court, obviously.
Right. Great. Well, thank you so much again, Danny. We appreciate everything you do. And
thank you. I just wanted to say hi to Josie. I just saw Josie Heath,
okay.
And I haven't seen you in so long. Hi, Josie.
So Danny, I'm sure you're busy, but if you'd like to stay on and join a breakout room, it gets generated automatically. I encourage everybody to join their room, even if it's just for 5 minutes to say hi and kind of decompress and get an action plan together. That'll be lovely. And we will cut off at 6:15. Thanks again for being here. Have a great
I'm
evening.
gonna go eat dinner. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Danny. Appreciate you so much.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Do you want to
Hi,
pop into
Diana.
a room?
Sure. I'm good. Yeah, that'd be great.
Room 2 only has
Let's
3
see.
people
Oh, I
right
kind of,
now.
I know that in the past I've ended up with Josie and Raleigh twice.
Okay.
So I don't, I'm good here too. That's fine. Yay, wherever is good.
Diana, I think you probably have an accept or something on your screen to move to room 4. Oh, sorry, you're muted. There you. I'm unmuting you as you're unmuting you too. Okay, well.
I'm good here. That's fine.
Yeah, me too.
So, and of course I can't, oh, okay. I can't find my notes. I didn't file them yet. So I'm like, shit. So usually I'm very organized and
Oh,
I couldn't
funny.
remember. I feel like, cause then we went back and forth through emails. So maybe we were supposed to give money to Brittany. We were doing retro for Michael. And then I don't.
I know the whole who are we contributing to
Yeah,
conversation
that's right.
got really confusing at
And
the
then I
last
think
meeting.
Cobalt kind of got just dropped. So
I don't remember us even having a discussion about
I agree. I
Cobalt,
don't think we
and
did either. So
what Terry said is, obviously we should be contributing to Cobalt.
yes.
So
In fact, their gala is coming up. So maybe we'll send out, or maybe we could, I don't know. Because it's this, I believe it's this set. No, it's 2 weeks, but it's the same day as the Democratic Assembly, right? So if you're going to the county assembly, yeah, I mean,
yeah, and I mean that
Denver,
could be
right,
all
it's a Denver
day.
thing, right? Exactly. So
yeah,
just
but
like
maybe we can do a sponsorship or something, but
yeah,
it seems like doing an email vote.
yeah. That's what we talked about was the Democratic Party, the Boulder County Dems.
Right.
I'm like, and we were having a major discussion about some, but I can't remember. Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, that was a really good program.
It really was.
Of course. I mean,
he's
how can you?
Always my favorite.
Oh, how can you freaking miss with Ian?
I know,
He's just
right?
unbelievable.
I know.
Yeah, my husband just came in and delivered a glass of wine.
Nice. I know. I was like,
Cheers.
every time I'd go off, I'm like, okay, I'm having a little sip of wine.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, or
it's a happy hour after all.
I know, right? Exactly. I know. It's kind of funny, but yeah.
Oh,
man. Yeah, that was good though.
Yeah.
And she's, I mean, gosh, she's so amazing.
And
it's kind of funny because I wrote a letter to the editor for the library and I'm like, okay.
Oh, I was going to say, I saw your letter this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But then I saw the one that was after me and I'm like, oh my God.
For God's sake. Yeah. I was going to mention that too. It was like, really? Yeah. What about the rights of the embryos? Oh.
And I didn't read it all the way. All I saw was a quote from Mother Teresa and I'm like,
Yeah, no, I read the whole thing.
Because you don't
Um,
take care of people the way she did. You
mm,
get no talking rights.
you know, yeah, well, a Catholic nun, I mean, you know,
Well, exactly, right. You know, I like to say I'm a
She's
reformed
forgiven.
Catholic.
I am a Reformed Catholic.
Yeah,
as
so it's exactly. It's just like, man, no.
That was an old part of my life.
Very
I
long.
have seen the light.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, that
Very-
light is not a Catholic church.
No. Exactly.
Ah, okay,
Jill.
how are we doing for time here? Oh,
You are still muted, dear. Are you? I liked how Danny said, even after 2 years, we're still figuring it out. It's all good. Hi, how are you this evening?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well, thank you.
Good. So glad you could join us.
indeed. I am gonna run off for just a minute.
Okay,
Lisa.
okay. So Jill, are you a member?
Yes,
My dog's about to go crazy, so if you hear barking, it's him.
well, I understand. Those of us
Yes,
who are pet parents, we have to, yeah.
I know. It's like having a toddler again. I'm like, oh my gosh, because this is always kind of his 3 to 6 is his crazy hour, right? And
Okay.
today was a little iffy on the weather, so he's not had as much exercise as usual.
Oh, okay.
But yeah,